The Carpathian Mountains hide countless secrets beneath their ancient stone. In a remote valley near the village of Poianari, where mist clings to the peaks like memory itself, a limestone cave had remained sealed for centuries, its entrance hidden behind vegetation and time's indifference. No one knew what lay inside until October 2024, when an earthquake measuring 4.8 on the Richter scale rattled the region and changed everything. The rockfall came at dawn, a thunderous collapse that opened a jagged wound in the mountainside. By afternoon, villagers had gathered, peering into the darkness with flashlights and curiosity. What they found defied explanation. A chamber untouched for likely 500 years, its walls covered entirely in frescoes. Medieval paintings in ochre, ultramarine and gold leaf depicted religious figures, geometric patterns and symbols that matched nothing in the known iconography of Eastern Orthodox art. The symbols were the puzzle: interlocking circles, spiraling lines, angular marks that resembled no alphabet anyone recognized. Some suggested they were decorative flourishes, artistic whimsy from a medieval painter lost to history. Others whispered of something deeper: a code, a map, or a message deliberately hidden and deliberately preserved. Within days, archaeologists descended on the cave. Within weeks, the site had become an international mystery. This is the story of what happened when 6 people decided to decode those symbols themselves, and what they discovered in the process. Chapter 1. The Fracture. The earthquake woke Dr. Elena Sherban at 4:47 a.m. She felt it as tremors in her bed, a low rumble echoing through her apartment in Cluj-Napoca, a distant, almost familiar sensation that had haunted Transylvania since its geological formation. Elena was a paleographer, a specialist in medieval manuscripts and historical writing systems. Her expertise lay in dead languages, forgotten alphabets, and the stories that humans scratch into stone when they need something to survive them. By 7 a.m. her phone had begun to ring. Her brother Christian called from Poianari village where he managed a small inn. "Elena, you need to come. There's something you need to see." The mountain opened up. She drove for 3 hours, watching the landscape transform from urban sprawl to pine forests to the dramatic peaks of the southern Carpathians. Christian was waiting at the roadside, his weathered face lined with excitement and something else. Concern, perhaps, or the weight of knowing that discovery carries responsibility. The cave mouth was impossible to miss. The rockfall had created a jagged aperture roughly 8 meters wide, its edges still dusty with stone powder. Fragments of limestone lay scattered like broken teeth. Inside, the darkness was absolute, the kind that flashlights barely penetrated. "They sealed it when the first tremor stopped," Christian explained. "The authorities, but not before the mayor and half the village saw what was inside." Elena stepped closer, her eyes adjusting. She could make out the rough texture of the stone walls, the way the late morning light struggled to penetrate. And then, gradually, she saw them. The frescoes. Her breath caught. They were extraordinary. Even from the entrance, she could discern figures in ceremonial dress, their halos rendered in what appeared to be genuine gold leaf. But it was the patterns surrounding them that held her attention. Spirals, intersecting circles, a sequence of symbols that repeated across the upper portion of the chamber, like a sentence written in an unknown tongue. "The authorities arrived yesterday," West Christian said. "Archaeologists from Bucharest. They've cordoned it off, but they're allowing preliminary study. I mentioned you. Dr. Popescu, the lead archaeologist, said if you could come before the official team expands tomorrow, you could examine the site." Elena nodded slowly, still staring at the symbols. Her fingers itched to touch them, to measure them, to photograph them from every angle. In 30 years of studying medieval inscriptions, she had never seen anything quite like this. The symbols were deliberate, methodical, repetitive in a way that suggested meaning. "There's something else," Christian said quietly. "The symbols. People have been coming to the village all morning. Locals, tourists, history enthusiasts. Word travels fast. And there's a man staying at the inn. German. He arrived yesterday, right after the news broke. He's been asking questions about the cave, about whether anyone's made rubbings of the symbols yet. Elena's attention sharpened. A researcher? Maybe. Or maybe someone with other interests. I've been in the hospitality business long enough to recognize when someone is hunting for something specific. That evening, as Elena set up her equipment in the entrance of the cave, a portable light rig, her camera, measuring tape, and leather journals, she noticed him. A man in his 50s with sharp features and the bearing of someone accustomed to getting what he wanted. He stood at the perimeter watching. When Elena made eye contact, he smiled but didn't approach. Instead, he turned and walked back toward the village. Elena photographed the symbols methodically, her trained eye cataloging every detail. The repetition was almost musical, a pattern interrupted by what appeared to be a deliberate variation near the chamber's western wall, a break in the code, or perhaps a key. By midnight, she had filled 3 notebooks with observations and measurements. The symbols were unlike anything she'd encountered, yet they seemed to reference something, a system, a language, a communication across centuries. She did not know, as she packed away her equipment, that the German had begun making his own inquiries. He did not know that within 48 hours the cave would become contested ground. None of them knew that the symbols on those medieval frescoes had been waiting 500 years for someone to finally understand them, and that understanding would change everything. Chapter 2. The Convergence. By the second morning, the cave had become a point of convergence for unlikely people united by singular obsessions. Dr. Popescu, the lead archaeologist from the Bucharest National Museum, arrived with a team of 4 specialists and a portable laboratory. He was methodical, skeptical, and primarily interested in dating the frescoes and confirming their medieval provenance, a task that would require weeks of analysis. The symbols to him were decorative. Elena arrived early, before the official team, and spent 2 hours photographing the western wall where the pattern broke. The variation was subtle but unmistakable. Where the other symbols flowed with rhythmic consistency, this section contained something different. A figure that resembled a star, nested within a circle with radiating lines that suggested direction or movement. Christian brought coffee and bread, watching his sister work. "The German is leaving today," he said. "Or so he told me. He checked out this morning." "Did he take anything?" "Not that I could see, but he was very interested in your findings. Asked me twice if you'd made any progress interpreting the symbols." Elena felt a small chill. Academic obsession was common in her field, but this felt different. This felt territorial. The morning grew busier. By noon, 3 additional researchers had arrived: a historian from the University of Timișoara, a specialist in medieval iconography, and a graduate student documenting the site for a doctoral dissertation. The cave entrance had become a gathering place, a pilgrimage site for anyone fascinated by mysteries written in stone. Then the German returned. He arrived mid-afternoon in a rental car, accompanied by 2 men who looked hired for specific purposes. He carried himself with quiet confidence, and when he approached Dr. Popescu, the tone of the conversation was distinctly different from academic exchange. Elena, watching from the equipment station, saw money change hands. Not a bribe, something more formal. An offer, perhaps, or an arrangement. Christian appeared beside her. "That's not good." "What do you know about him?" Elena asked. "His name is Klaus Richter, private collector, German, but he works across Europe. I heard through the proprietor in the village. He stays in 3 places a year, always in towns with archaeological sites, always looking to acquire important finds before official channels can intercede." Elena understood immediately. Private collectors existed in a legal gray area, purchasing artifacts through questionable means, hoarding historical treasures in private collections. If Richter was interested in the symbols, it wasn't for academic purposes. She made a decision. Carefully, methodically, she began photographing every single symbol with extreme precision, documenting angles, measurements, and potential correlations. She worked through the afternoon, ignoring the noise of the growing crowd, the conversations of other researchers, the increasing tension at the site. By sunset, Dr. Popescu had made an announcement. The cave would be officially closed to outside researchers. Only the Bucharest team would have access beginning tomorrow. The decision seemed aimed directly at Elena and the others who'd been conducting independent study. As the researchers dispersed, Elena noticed Richter speaking quietly with one of Popescu's team members, a younger archaeologist named Viorel. Money changed hands again. That night, Elena drove to a small monastery 40 kilometers away, a place she had visited years before while researching medieval manuscripts. Brother Georga still lived there, a monk and paleographer who had devoted his life to cataloging obscure historical texts housed in remote religious communities. She showed him the photographs of the symbols. She watched his weathered face carefully, searching for recognition or surprise. "These are old," he said finally. "Very old. Not medieval, I think. The style. It reminds me of something I've seen only once. A manuscript from the 14th century, brought here by monks fleeing persecution in the south. It was written in cipher. No one has ever deciphered it." "Where is this manuscript?" Elena asked carefully. "In the monastery vault. It's been secured for centuries." "But Elena," he paused, studying her face, "if these symbols match that cipher, then someone 500 years ago knew things they were not supposed to know, and they were hiding." Elena left the monastery with a copy of the 14th century manuscript safely tucked in her bag. She now possessed evidence that the symbols in the cave were not random decoration. They were communication. They were a message deliberately preserved and deliberately obscured. By the time she returned to her apartment, she understood. She was no longer simply researching a puzzle. She was part of a race against time. If Richter was involved, if official channels were compromised, the symbols would disappear into private hands within days, their meaning lost forever to academic study. She photographed the manuscript pages carefully, cross-referenced them against her cave photographs, and began the work of decoding. She did not sleep that night, and by dawn, she had made the first breakthrough. Chapter 3. The pattern emerges. The breakthrough came at 5:47 a.m., as Elena sat in near darkness with only her desk lamp and 2 cups of cold coffee gone bitter with time. The symbols were not random. They were mathematical. The repetitive pattern was based on a geometric progression, with each cycle slightly more complex than the last. The variation on the western wall, the one with the star and radiating lines, was not a break in the pattern. It was the solution. It was pointing towards something. Elena cross-referenced it against the 14th century cipher from the monastery. 3 of the symbols matched exactly. 3 identical marks separated by centuries, painted in the cave, written in the hidden manuscript. This was not coincidence. This was intentional preservation. She spent the morning creating overlays, digital composites that showed how the 2 symbol systems aligned. A pattern emerged. The cipher was incomplete. The cave frescoes provided the missing elements, the final components of a code that spanned 500 years. But the code itself, what did it mean? Elena made the call to Christian at 8 a.m. "I need access to the cave again," she said. "Before Popescu's team arrives, can you manage it?" "Elena, they've sealed it. Then unseal it. You manage the local relationships. Tell them it's urgent. Tell them my research requires 1 more hour inside." Christian was silent for a moment. Then, "I'll call the mayor." By 10 a.m., Elena was back at the cave entrance, alone with a key provided by the mayor and approximately 90 minutes before the official team would arrive for the day's work. She brought her notebook, her portable spectrometer, and a new theory. Inside the cave, the morning light penetrated only to the entrance. Beyond that lay complete darkness, illuminated by the battery-powered light rig she set up. The frescoes revealed themselves gradually, the gold leaf catching the artificial light and casting it back in soft, ancient gleams. She focused on the western wall, the location of the star symbol. Up close, in high-intensity light, she began to see details that had been invisible from a distance. Fine lines scratched beneath the paint layer. Not intentional artistic flourishes, but marks, deliberate, careful markings that formed words in Latin, the language of medieval clergy and scholarship. Elena photographed each word, documenting them in her notebook with trembling hands. Hic sepultus est aurum regis et secretum ejus. Here is buried the king's gold and his secret. Below this inscription, marked by the star symbol, was a directional indicator. Lines pointing outward and downward, toward the western portion of the chamber where the limestone wall met the cave floor, toward something hidden beneath centuries of sediment and stone. Elena heard voices outside, the research team arriving early. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed the limestone rubble piece closest to the indicated point and began carefully clearing debris from the wall base. The cave floor was soft here, worked soil mixed with mineral deposits from water flow. Something was buried. Her fingers brushed against something solid. Wood. Ancient, waterlogged wood that might have once been a cabinet or chest. It crumbled slightly at her touch, compromised by centuries of moisture and mineral incrustation. The voices grew louder. She could hear Popescu's distinctive accent ordering the ceiling chain to be removed. Elena made a rapid decision. Using her phone, she photographed the wooden remains, the wall inscription, and the star symbol from multiple angles. Then she photographed the stone rubble surrounding the deteriorated wood. Dr. Popescu entered the cave, just as Elena was stepping back from the western wall. "Dr. Sherbin," he said, his tone cool and formal, "you were given specific instructions about access protocols. I was following up on important findings," Elena replied calmly, turning to face him. "The symbols are not merely decorative. They're part of a coded message system spanning centuries. I've documented evidence of an inscription beneath the paint layer, Latin text referring to a royal burial, and there's a wooden artifact at the wall base that appears to be contemporary with the frescoes. It requires immediate conservation analysis." Popescu's expression hardened. He stepped past Elena to examine the wall. His team members gathered behind him, their cameras already raised. It was then that Elena noticed Klaus Richter standing at the cave entrance, flanked by his two associates. His expression was one of sharp calculation. Popescu turned back to Elena. "You've disturbed the archaeological record without documentation or authorization. That's a serious violation." "I've documented everything," Elena said. "My photographs are time-stamped and comprehensive. Nevertheless, Dr. Sherbin, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the site. Your independent research is compromising the integrity of the official excavation." Elena gathered her equipment slowly, deliberately. She could feel Richter's eyes on her the entire time. As she passed him on her way out, he smiled, a small, knowing expression. She was almost to her car when Christian caught up with her. "Elena, what happened?" Popescu looked furious. "I found the message," Elena said quietly, "and I found proof that something is buried there. Something valuable enough that people are willing to compromise their professional integrity to control it." "What do you mean?" "I mean Richter is connected to Popescu, and Viorel, and probably others on that team. They're going to excavate that burial chamber tonight after everyone leaves, and they're going to remove whatever's inside before it can be reported to the authorities." Christian's face paled. "How do you know that?" "Because that's what I would do if I were them," Elena said, "and because I recognized the look on Richter's face. It was the look of someone who just got exactly what they came for, confirmation that their investment was worth the effort." Elena got in her car. She had perhaps 6 hours before the team would move. 6 hours to decide whether to contact the authorities officially or to do what her instincts screamed, return to the cave tonight and see what was buried before anyone else could claim it. She made her choice around noon. By sunset, Elena had recruited 2 people she trusted. One was Christian. The other was Dr. Soren Marish, the historian from the University of Timișoara, who had suspected corruption in the official team and had been quietly gathering his own documentation. Together, they would return to the cave that night. Together, they would discover what the symbols had been guarding for 5 centuries. If you're enjoying this adventure so far, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Chapter 4. The Expedition. Midnight came with a clear sky and the kind of silence that only mountains know. Elena, Christian, and Soren approached the cave from the forest side, moving carefully through underbrush and limestone outcrops, avoiding the main path where official seals and warning tape marked the entrance. The cave could be accessed from the western flank, a natural opening formed by water erosion centuries before the main chamber was sealed. It was narrow, requiring them to move sideways through the passage, their headlamps creating ghostly shadows on the stone walls. The passage descended gradually, following the ancient path of underground water flow, until it opened into the main chamber. The frescoes seemed different in darkness, more haunting. The artificial light transformed the gold leaf into something otherworldly, the painted faces appearing to watch the intruders with silent judgment. "Carefully," Soren whispered, though no one would hear them. Popescu's team left sensors at the entrance. They'll know someone's been here, but they can't know who or when. Elena led them directly to the western wall. The wooden fragments she'd exposed that morning were more visible now, more clearly defined. The wood was oak, judging by the grain pattern. Oak that had been sealed in a compartment, protected from the worst of moisture, but still subject to 500 years of slow decay. Christian brought out the specialized tools he'd borrowed from his friend who managed the regional archaeological supply depot. A conservation kit with brushes, stabilizing compounds, and carefully designed implements for extracting fragile objects. Working with meticulous precision, they began to carefully expose the wooden chest. It was smaller than Elena had initially thought, perhaps 60 centimeters long, 40 centimeters wide, constructed from wooden planks held together with iron bands now corroded to delicate rust formations. "It's sealed," Christian observed, pointing to the lid. Wax, still partially intact after 5 centuries, had been used to seal the lid to the body. "Can you open it without destroying the contents?" Elena asked. "I can try to gently break the seal without touching the wax if it's brittle enough. But Elena, what if the contents have deteriorated? 500 years of moisture." "Then we document what we find," Elena said. It took 40 minutes of careful work. Christian applied gentle heat with a specialized tool, warming the ancient wax until it became pliable enough to separate without crumbling. Soren photographed every stage of the process while Elena took detailed notes. When the lid finally lifted, the 3 of them held their breath. Inside, preserved in what appeared to be oil-soaked cloth wrapped around individual items, lay documents. Hundreds of them, perhaps pages that had somehow survived the centuries. The paper was brown with age, fragile as thought itself, but legible. Elena carefully lifted the first batch. Handwritten text in medieval Latin. Her hands trembled as she translated. "The symbols are the path. The king's gold finances the escape. These records prove the deception. Let history know what was hidden." It continued, page after page. Some were formal documents, church records, treasury ledgers, correspondence between clergy. Others appeared to be personal journals, accounts of events spanning a decade. "This is a chronicle," Soren whispered. "A record of something significant, something that the church wanted to hide." Elena found a sealed parchment envelope deeper in the chest. It bore the royal seal of medieval Wallachia. Unbroken wax preserved in oilcloth, the impression clear, a crowned figure, the sigil of a specific prince. "We need to leave," Christian said, suddenly tensing. "Someone's approaching the entrance." They froze. Footsteps echoed from the passage entrance, moving deliberately toward the main chamber. Multiple people. "Popescu," Soren breathed. They came early. Elena made a rapid decision. She carefully returned the documents to the chest, maintaining the oilcloth arrangement precisely as they had found it. "Help me cover this," she said. "Now." They worked frantically, replacing the limestone rubble, blending the excavation site back into its undisturbed appearance. The footsteps grew closer. They were 20 seconds from being discovered. "The back passage," Christian said, pulling them toward the small opening they'd entered through. They squeezed into the narrow space just as lights appeared in the main chamber. From the confined darkness of the passage, they could hear Popescu's voice, then Richter's German accent. They heard the words, "Secure the chamber. No one enters without authorization." The 3 of them remained motionless in the passage for 20 minutes, barely breathing. Then, Carefully, they reversed their path through the narrowing stone corridor and emerged into the night forest. They didn't speak until they were a kilometer away from the cave, hidden among the pine trees where sound seemed to disappear into the earth itself. "That sealed envelope," Elena said quietly. "It has the royal seal. That document could change our understanding of 15th century history in this region." "They're going to excavate," Soren said. "Once they realize the chest is there, it becomes a race. Official channels will be circumvented. Documents will disappear into private collections." "Then we need to get back inside," Elena said. "We need to understand what's in those papers. We need to know what they're willing to commit crimes to conceal." "Elena, that's too dangerous," Christian protested. "More dangerous than letting 5 centuries of history vanish?" Elena countered. "We know where the information is. We know how to access it without detection. One more night. We can photograph every single document, preserve the record digitally before anyone can erase it." Christian looked at Soren, who nodded slowly. "One more night," Christian agreed. "But we plan this more carefully, and we leave no trace." Chapter 5. The Race. They returned to the cave the following night with better planning and more precise equipment. This time, they brought Christian's camera, a professional-grade digital SLR with macro lenses and lighting systems that could photograph text with archival precision. They brought backup batteries, a scanner, and the kind of meticulous preparation that only comes from understanding the stakes. The wooden chest remained undisturbed. Popescu's team had been inside the chamber, but they hadn't yet discovered the sealed compartment. Perhaps they were waiting for conditions to be more secure. Perhaps they were moving more cautiously than Elena had anticipated. This time they worked methodically. Each document was photographed individually, the pages handled with conservation gloves carefully documented. The sealed envelope with the royal seal received particular attention. Soren photographed it from 15 different angles, documenting every aspect of the wax impression. Hours passed. The chamber seemed to exist outside time, the Frescoes watching silently as the 3 intruders worked to preserve history that someone wanted erased. It was Christian who first noticed the scent change, the smell of recent fire, of torch smoke in the passage. "Someone's coming," he said. But this time, they didn't have time to hide. The passage opened and 3 figures emerged: Popescu, Richter, and a person Elena didn't recognize. A woman, middle-aged, with the bearing of someone used to authority. What happened next occurred with the speed and inevitability of predetermined fate. Popescu's expression transformed from shock to controlled fury. "Dr. Sherban, Dr. Marish, Christian, you're trespassing on a sealed archaeological site. That's a serious criminal offense." "So is tampering with official records," Elena replied calmly, standing protectively in front of the open chest. "So is destroying historical artifacts for personal profit. So is corrupting an official excavation to cover up a private theft." The woman stepped forward. "I'm Prosecutor Leah Dumitru, Regional Office. Dr. Popescu has informed me of illegal activity at this site. I'll need to confiscate your equipment and documents immediately." Elena's blood went cold. She looked at Soren, at Christian. The game had shifted. This was no longer an academic race. This was legal territory, murky and dangerous. "These documents belong to the Romanian people," Elena said. "They're historical artifacts that predate any living person's claim of ownership. They need to be analyzed by the National Museum, not controlled by private collectors. That determination will be made by the authorities," Prosecutor Dumitru said coolly. "After proper investigation. For now, I'm confiscating all photographic materials and requiring you to surrender any copies of these documents. Failure to comply will result in immediate arrest." It was then that Soren did something that surprised everyone. He raised his phone and pressed a button. A light appeared in the cave passage, distant but approaching. "I have backup," Soren announced, "and they're recording everything. Every word spoken in this cave, every action taken here is being documented by someone outside this chamber. If anything disappears, if any documents are mishandled, there will be witnesses." It was a bluff. Elena realized it immediately, but it was a powerful bluff, and it did exactly what Soren intended. Prosecutor Dumitriu's expression shifted. Richter took a subtle step backward. Popescu's face flushed with anger, but also something else. Fear. "Who did you contact?" the prosecutor demanded. "The regional news," Soren lied smoothly, "and the director of the Bucharest National Museum, and the Cultural Ministry. The story of this cave, these symbols, these documents, it's too significant to hide, too important to let disappear." There was a moment of absolute tension, a balance point where everything could tip in different directions. Then the prosecutor's phone rang. She answered it, listened for 30 seconds, and her face went completely white. She spoke briefly, then disconnected. "There's been a development," she said coldly. "A journalist has made inquiries about suspicious archaeological activity in this region. The ministry has ordered an independent audit of this excavation. Pending that audit, all materials remain sealed and protected. No one is to remove anything from this chamber." She looked directly at Popescu and Richter. "That applies to everyone. I suggest you both prepare yourselves for questioning." She turned to Elena. "You three will come with me to the station. You'll answer questions about how you accessed this site and what you've documented. But you're not under arrest. Not yet." Chapter 6. The Revelation. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the National Museum's conservation lab in Bucharest, watching as Dr. Popescu, no longer leading the official excavation, examined the sealed envelope with the royal seal. The investigation had been swift and comprehensive. Soren's bluff had become reality when Elena actually contacted a journalist, who had contacted the ministry, who had demanded an independent audit. Prosecutor Dumitriu, caught between competing loyalties and criminal evidence, had made a deal with the authorities in exchange for cooperation. Popescu was facing charges. Richter, it turned out, had connections to European black market artifact dealers, and his presence at the site had triggered an international investigation. Villarreal had confessed to accepting bribes and had agreed to become a witness in exchange for reduced charges. The documents, all of them, were now the property of the Romanian state and under the protection of the National Museum. The envelope is addressed to a specific person, Dr. Muraru, the museum's head of conservation, said. She was examining the wax seal under magnification. It says, "To whoever finds this truth, know that history is written by those who survive to tell it." She carefully began the process of breaking the ancient seal. The wax crumbled delicately. Inside, a single folded parchment, written in a shaky hand but still legible. It was a confession, written by a medieval prince, a specific historical figure whose name Elena immediately recognized, detailing events that had been deliberately obscured from official history. The prince had concealed the truth about a neighboring ruler's death, a death that had consequences for the entire region's political structure. The documents in the chest were the evidence of this concealment, the real records, the truth, hidden away by a man who wanted history someday to know what had really happened. "He's telling us," Elena whispered, reading the words carefully, "that the symbols are the key to authenticating the documents. They appear in official church records, in royal correspondence, scattered through 5 centuries of archival materials. The symbols were the prince's signature on the truth, his way of marking the real records." "It's extraordinary," Muraru said. "If we cross-reference the symbols with the archives, we might be able to identify dozens of other documents that contain this prince's testimony. An entire hidden archive spanning centuries." Over the next weeks, Elena led the research team that decoded the symbol system completely. It wasn't a language. It was a numerical code, marking documents by date and significance. By following the symbols through regional archives, they discovered that this medieval prince had quietly influenced historical records for decades, leaving breadcrumbs that only another scholar would recognize. The truth, when it emerged, was less sensational than the conspiracy to hide it. A neighboring prince had died in suspicious circumstances. The royal family responsible had paid handsomely for the death to be recorded as accidental. The medieval prince, the one who hid the truth in the cave, had wanted history to know but had lacked the power to change official records, so he had left evidence for future generations. For 500 years, his message waited in a sealed chamber, beneath symbols no one could read for the right people to find it. Elena gave the keynote address at the archaeological conference where the full story was finally revealed. She stood before an audience of historians, archaeologists, and journalists, and told them about a journey that began with a rockfall and ended with the restoration of historical truth. The symbols were not a puzzle to be solved for treasure, she said. They were a message across time. A prince telling us, never accept the easy version of history. Never assume that official records contain the complete truth. Always look deeper. Always search for the evidence that others tried to hide. If this treasure hunt already has you hooked, hit the like button. It helps us bring more forgotten stories to light. Christian never returned to simply managing his small inn. He became a historical consultant, helping archaeologists plan excavations and understand local contexts. Soren received recognition from the academic community and became a specialist in exposing archival fraud. Elena was offered a position as director of a new department dedicated to finding and authenticating undiscovered historical records. Klaus Richter was extradited to Germany to face charges related to his activities across multiple countries. His collection of stolen artifacts was catalogued and repatriated to their countries of origin. The cave was declared a protected archaeological site and is now open to trained researchers and carefully supervised public tours. The frescoes are being restored, and the symbols have become a subject of academic study around the world. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales of discovery and hidden history. See you in the next adventure.